these support and resistance levels. Eventually, we can develop a DCI algo that tell us, okay, maybe you should buy a little bit of Bitcoin now using leverage, or there are so many different ways of doing things. So it's some information that we have that we will not have if we just did this fixed thing. Um, okay. So I think this basically covers everything about this one. So we are going back to the clock. So the clock, we can project it, right? Tell us where the top is going to be, where the bull market is going to be. Should be around November, December 24. So it's nice, because before having this, because it took me 12 years to put this picture together, and probably we will have more discoveries as we go along. But right now, I feel so good because just looking at this graph, looking at all the things together, I know where we are in the cycle. Okay. And of course, nobody has, what was called that thing in Tolkien with Palantir, it allowed you to see the future. We don't have that, right? But this is the closest thing to that, that we have a good understanding of where we are. Look at this, like for example, and allow us to explain things in a way that other people cannot explain, right? Why did we go here and stop there and come down, right? Because this was driven by this injection of cash of ETFs and also FOMO, and push the price up when we were not supposed to go up. We were supposed to be closer to the support line. So it was kind of similar what happened with COVID, where it was with injection of cash. It actually happened before when COVID happened. And then we arrived at a power law, and the price corrected itself because it was not the right time to have the bull run. And is it chance or is not chance? I think it's not chance because in general, if we not, I don't know what the right word, if we understand that this is a general trend and Bitcoin does, it follows it for a particular reason because of scaling property or whatever, some deep statistical reason, then it needs to, in average, follow the power law. So if it goes in something like this that basically doesn't agree with following the power law, it needs to correct itself. And this is what it's exactly is doing. And will it continue to go down a little bit, until we're ready for the bull market? Maybe, is what it seems he's doing right now. He's correcting. The support line is all the way to 32,000. So probably we're not going to crash to 32,000, 34,000, whatever it is, because it took last time we did that, but it took COVID, something dramatic at COVID, to actually reset everything to the trend line, to the support line. I don't think we are in a situation like that. So, but maybe a small correction, and then it's going to go up according to the plan. So it's like I say all the time, it's basically like driving with the lights on while everybody else is driving in the fog and they don't have the lights on, and so on. So we have this other indicator that is called the Earth coefficient, the Earth exponent, and basically, it's based on the fractal properties of Bitcoin. Bitcoin behaves like a fractal, so basically, it's not just this power law in general, but also if you dig in the way the price looks like at different scales, and it has different regimes, right? There are times where it behaves more like a trend following, and other times it behaves more like mean return, like it's oscillating back and forth around the value. We know what that value is, basically the power law. It oscillates around the power law. Other times it kind of violates that, because that is when it goes in this, rampage, and I say it's almost like he decided to go to Cancun and having a vacation, and having fun, and it becomes exponential. It goes up, 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 and basically follows like a trend following pattern. And in fact, and we can identify these two pattern using basically the fractal property of Bitcoin. Basically, you're looking at different methods in this way of understanding data called fractals, right? It basically, you look at how segmented the data is, and then there are mathematical tools that have been developed to calculate how the property of these fractals are, and there is this coefficient that people have used it. It's not used only for price. People use it for all kind of different data analysis, but it's nice because the way that this quantity is defined, it goes from 0 to 1, and anything above 0.5, it's trend following, and anything below 0.5 is mean return. So it's almost like identify different patterns and behavior in Bitcoin. Notice how when we are below 0.5, there is a little bit of lag because you need a lot of data. I'm going to see if we can modify. Right now, you don't have that option. It's like a fixed number of days, but eventually we can see if we can choose the interval in which to calculate this quantity. But you see, usually the bottoms are associated with values that are below 0.5, and here, when it goes, when it's supposed to, it doesn't follow the power law for whatever reason. There was this deviation here. Who knows what happened there? I intended to look it up and say, is there anything that happened that maybe made the price bullish during the time? But you see, again, like it happens right now, it was not supposed to be there. It corrected itself, right? And then the COVID actually gave it a good correction, went all the time to the support line. But in general, mean return is associated with the bottoms, and trend following is associated with the bubbles. And that is cool because, see here, it's another sign when we're going to get to the bubble, we should see a reverse of these, and it should start to go above 0.5. So it's another way of confirming we are in a bubble. We are continuing to go the bubble. See, there is a turning around when we reach the top because the price is falling. So it's actually one more indicator that, together with the others, it confirms in which regime are we. Are we oscillating around the power law? Are we actually going away from the power law and following a particular trend? So let's go to this one. This one, I'm trying to collect all the different way of expressing deviations from the trend. So basically, when you do that, these are called oscillators because they look like sine waves, up and down. So we have different ways. Showed you this one is relatively to the trend. So basically, you do price minus trend, divide by the trend. You can divide by the price. When you do that, you get something that is more uniform. All these bubbles were kind of similar height because basically they had different prices, and now you divide by the price, so they look much more uniform. The problem with these is like they are a little flat, so it's difficult to identify the precise stop. So it's interesting to look at, but I'm not sure it's the most useful way. And then you can have a compromise where you do kind of mean, so you get both the uniformity of doing it with dividing by the price, but also you get some of the sharpness of dividing by the trend. So there is a compromise there. But really the nicest one is this one where we do decay adjusted. So basically we compensate for that decay, the dimension of the tops. So now you get the sharpness, uh, it is really amazing because you're almost like pinpointing where the tops are, and the uniformity where basically all the bubbles here it does point us. This is why, while the timing is important, and you can consider the timing in your decisions. If you want to sell, are we reaching the top, right? I will say you do these like exactly like when you're driving, right? You maybe know where you're going and how the road is supposed to be, but you keep the eyes on the road. So as things are happening, we do have both the timing that is guiding us. So if we were dealing with these in real time, you will say, well, look, this is a huge deviation. So it's possibly a good idea for me to start to lock some of the gains. But at the same time, it's a kind of an anomaly, it looks like, because it's not happening where tops are supposed to happen. So maybe just sell partially, and you're waiting for the next bubble, because here the next bubble, that is where historically are supposed to happen, was smaller, but maybe it could have been much bigger, because maybe it happened at the real time. We don't know. I think here mostly was driven by FOMO, all excitement, all that liquidity was created. But it could be that the next one we do have smaller bubble here, and then we have a huge bubble here. Like is another example where that happened. Like here, for example, you see, had like an early top here, then a much higher here at the right timing. This was early on, just after the usual transition to full to bull. You see how this is kind of a critical time where the bull really starts. So it's really cool. When I invite you to spend time and doing your own explorations of these things and see, okay, what happened? Because we have a way of marking all these events, all these things, and you have this very, very coherent way of describing the patterns during the cycle. So you can go back and kind of study, say, okay, what happened? Let me look at all these, these particular places during the cycle. What happened there? What happened there? How does it look? How it compares today with today? So you can learn a lot of things and get a lot of insights about what is going on. What are the similarity? What are the differences? But I really like this indicator. Maybe it's our best one because it kind of divide the range between 0, when we are close to the bottom, and 100. So it's almost like a risk measure, risk of owning Bitcoin. I know that a Bitcoiner doesn't want to think that there is a risk, but in this case, is the price is so stretched away from where it's supposed to be that it's a good idea to sell some of your Bitcoin, or maybe you can do other things. People are proposing different idea. Maybe you can short MicroStrategy. You can open put options. Can get put options against MicroStrategy to get like a kind of almost like edging versus Bitcoin going down. You can do different things according to uh, your style, your knowledge of these things. We're trying to help you. Eventually we can cover all these cases. Maybe we can make a video with all the different options. We're trying to do a little bit these in the different channels that we have on the Discord server. There are different people with different experience that can help you and share their knowledge. But in my case, for example, I'm going to take some gains with. It's not even hope, right? There is so much information that tells you it's very likely that the price is going to be correcting, and you are doing it in a rational way where you say, I'm not going to sell everything, right? If the price continues to go up and it goes to 400, 500,000, I'm still going to benefit from that. And but at a certain point, it will correct because it's just the nature of things. These are how things work. They don't start to go crazy because there is, the financial institutions have their own cycles. They will try to uh, do that because even they need to, they are like all these ETFs actually, right? Actually, if anything, with the ETF, we will see even a stronger correction because they do want to make their client happy. They're not, they're not like ideological, like some of the Bitcoiners are. They do want to show that this idea of buying Bitcoin was a good idea. So they need to show that they had a good return. So if you can sell on the top or close to the top, they will sell. And so there will be a correction at a certain point. And so it's a pretty good thing. Here I'm showing what this index is going to look like, because it's difficult to represent it, but it's supposed to go up at a certain point, right? When the bull market is going to start, and we will reach a top close to 100, and then we will know that it's time to do something. But it's up to you what you think the best action is there. Now we do have. Let me see if I can take a small break. Let's see if there is anybody with any question. No, there is no problem at all. This is why we are here. We meet every Monday, even if we have like many recording. I could say go and look at the recording, but I like the interactions with the members. Also, a way to get to know you. So you're invited even to interrupt me and asking questions via voice. So it's more of direct interactions. But if you are in a um, noisy place, or um, if you feel shy, you can use the chat window to ask questions. Okay, so I don't see any questions. I'm going to the next indicator. I think is very cool, is our liquidity indicator. So how this works? Basically, in theory, I wanted, our main philosophy, we want to use all the internal information from Bitcoin, and we always try to make a story based on what Bitcoin does. But it's also cool to look at how it interacts with the world, and we can add more information as we go. But in this indicator, I try to look at global liquidity, so come up with a measure of global liquidity using different M1s, M2s, different countries, uh, different banks, influence on the liquidity, and I put it all together. Now, is this the best way to do it? Maybe not, because maybe they have different impact, and that can be actually studied. One can make a model and look at, okay, what among all these things, all these measures of liquidity, which one has a bigger impact on Bitcoin? And these are actually, there are mathematical tools to do that. I didn't just do that yet. I want to explore more and more these liquidity ideas, because I think are very interesting. There are some people that they emphasize liquidity too much, and it's almost they are trying to say that Bitcoin is all about global liquidity. It's not true. The relationship is much more complex. It's more like Bitcoin. It's like two clocks, right? There is this clock that is a global liquidity that has its own periodicity that is different from the 4-year cycle of Bitcoin. And then Bitcoin, it does its own thing that is 4 years inner internal cycle. And then, Bitcoin, of course, operates in the world. People are moving money from one asset to another. There are people are investing in Bitcoin. So of course, Bitcoin is influenced by these external events, but in a more indirect way that many people think. There is a relationship. It's a complicated relationship, and it needs to be studied and developed. But people that say, "Oh, liquidity drives the price," they are not correct. So that is not real. When you look at the data, but one can still look at how they relate with each other and learn a lot of things. And this is what we are trying to do, because many of these other influencer, or analysts, whatever you want to call them, they show liquidity in the same graph with the price, and then they tell you, see, this is going up and that is going up. You see, by eye, they seem to be related, but I never saw a real model saying, okay, when liquidity changes, this is how it affects the price. And that is what I did in this purple line. So I created a model that explains what happened to the price when liquidity changes. So the purple line is basically an estimate of what the value of Bitcoin should be if it was driven by liquidity alone. And you can see, though it come close to the price that is white, but not exactly. In fact, there is a difference, right? We are diverging at times. And from the divergence, actually, one can learn stuff. Like, for example, what you do once you have something like that, when you say, okay, what is this good at, right? This is how scientists work. We make a model of a word, and then we say, how can I use what information is telling me? One of the way I think that this quantity is useful, this model is useful, is to see how this white line and purple line interact with each other, right? So, for example, we can notice that before every bull market, the purple line is above. And when that happens, basically, I'm shading the area between the two prices in different colors. So when the purple is above the white, is green, and red, vice versa, right? And you can see patterns. Now, maybe there are other patterns that I'm not noticing, but one of them that I notice is that the bull run is always identified by an excess. It's identified by the purple line being on top of a white line. In fact, we have these green areas. And if you're trying to understand what that means, it means that we have an excess of liquidity. We have enough liquidity to actually support the bull run. And so this seems to have happened every single time. So if you go back and look at see, because it's one of the useful things about doing it on TradingView, because you can actually look at the history and you can see that every single time this happened. Now, the first bubble that was not associated with the halving, that didn't happen. And one can try to understand that. Maybe it was very small little bubble. It was all internal to Bitcoin. It didn't care about having enough liquidity. It was easier also to create that bubble, right? Because the price went all the way to a crazy value of $30 or something. The market cap was much smaller. So it really was independent from liquidity. But then all the other ones where the market cap started to be much larger added this pattern. Now, could it be a coincidence? Could it be that I'm making a big deal out of this? And then it's just not meaningful. It could be, but this is how you use this type of indicator. You're trying to make sense of what they are telling you. I think it's a good interpretation. It looks like it's almost like a prerequisite for the bull run to start. It kind of makes sense, right? And also, kind of this line of reasoning is supported by what happens when we are too close to the top. And you can see, right, it looks like we don't have enough liquidity. And this kind of almost like a definition of what a bubble is. All this action is driven by pure FOMO. The two indicators get decoupled, the two measures get decouples, the real price versus the liquidity model. And it's also a way of identify where the tops are. It's not like pinpointing like the other indicators, but it's almost like a red alert, right? Okay, we are coming close to where we are supposed to find the top, and it's telling us in advance. Same thing here, where it's telling us in advance where the bull market is going to start. This is where the bull market is going to end. So it kind of makes sense if you interpret it in this way. Then at the light of this interpretation, we can try to understand what is going on right now. My interpretation of what is going on right now is that because of the ETF, we kind of overstand it. We're right, here where the power law is supposed to be, the price is correcting, and we didn't have enough liquidity to support this price action. We are waiting for the bull run. It is going to happen, like we say, about the end of the year. So if this action continues where the price is going down, and notice what happened. model for liquidity, not just for liquidity, right? Because this is not a liquidity per se, but the effect of liquidity on Bitcoin, I think is much more relevant, and this is why this model is better than other liquidity models, but basically just show you liquidity, not how liquidity affects the price. It's growing up, right? It's going up. So it's going up, and hopefully continues to go up. Then there will be some place, this is why I draw these kind of lines. Don't take them too seriously, but roughly to indicate the general direction of these patterns. We are supposed to meet somewhere. Then this indicator will switch to green, and like before, it's kind of like the like a prerequisite for the bull market to start. When it seems to be the right timing according to the clock, right? It happens more or less during the end of October, so the beginning of November. So maybe we'll take a little bit more. We need to accumulate more liquidity, and then by the end of the year, the bull market is supposed to start. So this is how use this indicator. These are basically like we made an oscillator of this indicator, like by subtracting the general trend. I need to make a table to explain the different ones. There is this one, I think, is the white one we see here is basically the same thing. It's the difference between them, and then I think I'm showing the orange um, the difference between the price and the trend line. And I added this red line, but I also need to extend properly in the future. I took these from these studies from this expert in liquidity called Michael Howells. He wrote a book that is called The Capital Wars, and is considered like a kind of global liquidity expert. He has many, many interviews. He has his own proprietary way of calculating global liquidity. And if you look at this, you look it up online, he has this kind of complicated chart of liquidity over many, many years, even before Bitcoin was created. And then he simplifies these oscillation. I cannot reproduce them, so I don't have them here. I can try, but I don't know exactly what he did. I'm going to dig more. But what I did, a little bit cheating, hopefully it's not bad at me, but I don't think I did anything wrong. You cannot see it in your indicators right now because I didn't add it yet officially. It's just my version. But I'm going to add this one, right? He posted it online, so it's public knowledge. And so basically, this red line is supposed to be like a simplification using a simple model, right? Basically, a sine wave of these oscillations. And what I did, because I don't know how he calculated, I went to look at where his red line in his graph is peaking when the Troy is. And all of it is about 65 months periodicity, so it takes 65 months to do like a full oscillation. While our Bitcoin oscillations were more like 48 months. But what is interesting that we are supposed to peak around October, November 25, the internal clock of Bitcoin. And for the first time, this liquidity clock that is 65 months instead of being 48, because I don't see any other. Maybe this one came close, but not really. It was more like here. But this one in the future is going to be much closer to the natural oscillation of Bitcoin. So we cannot be sure, but I think maybe that is going to look very bullish, because you have these two clock being synchronized for the first time. Um, we will see, right? But it looks like a very bullish signal. It's very interesting. So I'm going to add this red line and then extend it, but this we can call it the Howells. Let me stop for a second, double check anybody has any questions. I don't see any questions. That means my explanation is perfect and everybody understands what I'm talking about. I'm very optimistic, you can see. But okay, the other one we have is this one that see, I'm superimposing it with our normal, with our adaptive version. But below here, I'm showing uh, this other indicator that we have. But this is always better to like the liquidity one. You can do whatever you want, of course, but it's probably better showing it as separate, or you can play around, whatever you want. I showing like a separate indicator. But the usefulness of this one is what we are doing here. We are calculating what is called the returns. The returns are basically the price today over the price yesterday. So if we have a return that is above one, it means that that was a good day for Bitcoin, right? We went up. If it is below one, like 0.98, that means we lost about 2%, right? If it is 1.02, we gain 2% in that day. And right now it's done daily. I want to modify it where eventually it can be used a 10 scale. But right now, it works mostly for daily. So what you're seeing here, the gray spikes are the very fast. You see how crazy looking, because there is a lot of volatility, what is called volatility. How fast this thing changes is called the volatility. Volatility technically is the standard deviation of a returns. Um, so the standard deviation will be you calculate an average return and then you calculate the differences. When you do it usually over an interval, say you calculate it over a week, then you calculate all the returns over that week, calculate the average, calculate how big the changes relatively to that average are in average, and that is your standard deviation. So it's a measure of how much the returns change day by day. Um, we are not showing that. Maybe we should actually show that too, the standard deviation. Well, actually, it does, because yes, because actually this, you see how this red line is. So that is actually, we take the average and then we add standard deviation of the standard deviation below. So in a certain sense, you're also looking at volatility, that is this red line. Not per se, it's average plus volatility. So basically, we're seeing a range of the returns, uh, and I'm telling you how far you need to go to get one standard deviation above and below. That means anything that is going through in one direction or the other, like any spike that you see that goes through that standard deviation, it's an outlier. So this was an exceptionally good day. This was an exceptionally bad day. So you can. It's further information that we get about the behavior of Bitcoin. Now, the blue line here is what the power law says, because many people think it's this straight line. It's actually a very strong um, statistical property of Bitcoin. It goes beyond just, because in really the way of understanding the general trend is in average, that is what Bitcoin does. And so it should show up also in the returns. And in fact, it does, because the blue line, you see the blue line, it's imagine with power, the price always follow perfectly the trend, right? It is completely unrealistic, because it's supposed to be just like an average behavior. But when you can calculate what that returns to be following this perfect line. It's not a line, it's more like a J, right? Because remember, it's the power of 6 in time. So it's a very fast parabola, that always goes up with the power of 6, so it's a crazy J line. It looks like a straight line when you do it with log graph, in reality it's not a straight line, it's more like a J, like a hockey stick. But you can calculate, right, okay, to go up in this hockey stick, what will be the average return? And you can see if you went all the way to the early days, we're talking about like, more than 1% a day. That is kind of, let's see how it's 1.01, right? If I over this blue line. In the early days was absurd, because if you have something goes up 1% a day, you're going to make crazy amount of money. After a few years, you will have more money than all the money on earth. So it's unsustainable, right, to go up to with that kind of returns, and in fact, it corrected itself, right, and it went down to more sustainable values, and you can see the bright white line. This is basically these returns, but now averaged over a particular time, and you can always go to the bolt and you can decide. Right now we are averaging over 100, but you can make it smoother, using 1 year, whatever you like. Right now it's 100 days. So basically it's returns, and it oscillates wildly because, we have tops, right? So this, you see, when we had the first bubble, the returns went crazy, went even higher. There were times where we were making 3% a day. That is absurd, right? Absurd. And then, of course, when there was a correction, and we went to the bottom, we were actually losing money. So we went all the way to losing about 1% a day, and even worse. But you can see in average, right, notwithstanding all these oscillations over time, the real returns, that are the white ones, and if I choose longer periods, it will be even smoother, right? It will still show these huge big peaks, right? Because returns are really huge so if I may imagine I'm doing an average of returns at a peak, it's going to be much higher than if I do it at the bottom. But you can see, right, with your eyes, it is oscillating around the blue line. So it means it really follows the power law, even from a return point of view. From a statistical point of view, we are following the power law. And you can see over time, this is what people, there are two types of diminishing returns. There are the diminishing returns of the peaks. The peaks are going down, are becoming smaller and smaller, but also everyday returns are diminishing over time. They follow this. In fact, we can even write an equation for that. This is what the blue line is as an equation, and we can make a prediction. You see how in average they follow. So all the critics of the power law say, oh, you're drawing just, now we're describing a very precise statistical property of Bitcoin, but overall it has this weird in average power law behavior, and you can show it by what the returns are doing. So that is the blue line. So you can see if in average I should put like a little line here at 1, because you can see when it's above or below 1, did we have a good day, a bad day? Right now, of course, the blue line, it's above 1 because, Bitcoin is going up. Now, if you're curious, I don't know if we can, is there a way of showing more decimal places here? Do you know? Saving face. Is there a way of showing more decimal place? We can look it up, but because you see it's 1.01, 1.01, it doesn't give us more decimal place, but maybe there is a way of doing that. But because I know by heart, right now, if you went and look at the real value here, we need more decimal places because it will be cool. Right now, we are making the returns are 1.001, and that means 0.1% a day. The power law predicts that we are supposed to do every single day 1.01. Of course, these are going down next year, and you see it's flattening out, so it takes longer and longer time to see these changes. So that is the good news. So we are going down in returns, but these change in returns are slower. So they were very, very fast in the beginning. Now they're kind of stabilizing. And so it doesn't change much, if I calculate it 2 weeks from now. But right now, so you can kind of use the year. So it will take 1 year to see a substantial change in these returns. Right now, the returns are about 0.1% a day. And that if you compound it over 1 year, it's about 46%. That is something that, for example, sailors mention all the time. Oh, we're making, because you actually can look at yearly returns, and we're coming close to that, about 46%. It will take more than a decade to go all the way down to 24, 25%. It's still amazing, but we are going down towards that level over a period of a decade. Now, what these are and why we are below that, because we are going down. We touch the power law, and then we are losing relatively to the power law, right? We are moving downwards. You see, we are moving downwards. The price is moving downwards. So of course, it's correcting itself, and actually now we're making even less money than in average, right? We're averaging over the last 100 days than what the power law says we should make. And other times, of course, we are above. Um, and I drew these two lines, the green one and the purple line, because what is going, and I also drew these two markers, but you can put yourself in the chart. That I drew this by hand. This is actually programmed in the indicator. I think you should be able to see it. And the significance of these two lines is that this is, remember that we can calculate or estimate the top. We are supposed to go all the way to 100,000. We can shift these other 200,000, and that bull market is supposed to happen at the end of this year. So I kind of marked by hand this range of dates where we should see the bull market. So the bull market is going to cover this range in between these two blue lines. And this line, in fact, next improvement should be like, I'm going to extend it for 500 days, both with little dots. But if we move along this exponential and go all the way to 200,000, we can then calculate the returns. What will be the average returns to do that? And it turns out it's about 0.33% per day. So this is where I draw this green line. So in other words, we should be able to see the purple line going above the blue line for sure, because we need to make more money. We need to have more returns than just moving along the power law. That is the time when we actually go above the power law. And in fact, we go above the power law by a factor of 3, right? And this is why, that is another way of thinking. This is why it's good to take some gains, because it's a time that is going to last 1 year, where we are actually going to see returns that are 3 times bigger than what the power law says we are able to do. If you don't do that and you're just sitting, then there'll be a correction, unavoidable correction, and we go down and go back to the trend. It's almost like it never happened. And so you lost an opportunity. Now, you could even make money when we are going down by, maybe buying some put options against MicroStrategy, or maybe some of the mining company. If you are a sophisticated Bitcoiner, you can do things like that. Just study, research it, understand what you're doing. Don't do anything degenerate. Do it with a small portion of your holdings. Borrow, again, carefully. There is nothing wrong in doing things like that. Anybody that tells you the contrary, he's wrong. because they cannot judge. They can say what they can say is, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have time, if you don't have an energy, if you don't want to focus on these things, then yes, just hodl, because you're going to be right anyway by hodling over the long time. But if you have the time, energy, focus, and the also psychological attitude, because it takes some, you need to handle your emotion. This is why we are trying also to develop tools where you can do this automatically, instead of because if you have a bot that does this and you set it up correctly and you monitor it, then that deals a lot also with emotions. But you can do it also manually if you know what you're doing. And if you, I will suggest a way to deal with emotion: make a plan and stick to the plan. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But the usefulness of this indicator is, and again, I'm going to improve it by making an extension. We need to see the white line going above a green line, or stay around the green line, because we need to have along this, during this range of time, that is basically the bull run, we need to see this white line stay above, or at least in average, right? It can dip, it can go above, but in average, it should be very consistently around this value to get there. And if it doesn't, in fact, relatively early on, as we get more and more data, even starting by the end of January, we'll say, we need data to get the stats right? We can see, are we on the path of reaching this 200,000, right? Because if we stay below there, it's worrisome, because usually it's very, very consistent, right? We can be below, but maybe grow towards that and then stay above. So in average, it's still there, but it's not going to be really crazy. Usually it's very consistent. Remember, we follow this trend following pattern, so it's very, very consistent. It should stay above this green line, or maybe being around that green line. The purple line is kind of a little bit more bullish scenario, basically much more bullish scenario. If we stay above that, then we go all the way to 500,000. So, and anything in between. There will be a way of knowing early on, even before we reach the top, that we are actually on the right path, that we have a returns to sustain this growth. If they could start to accelerate, but again, in the past, once we start to go up in this pattern, we do have corrections. Sometimes we go even faster, but in average, we follow a very consistent pattern. That pattern, like I said, if we stay at about 0.33% every day, in average, we reach 200,000. If we do 0.66, this is what it is, percent a day, we reach 500,000. A million, if I remember well, it's more like 0.7. I think we are not going to do that. It's going to be somewhere here. This is why I didn't draw it. As a reference, last bull market, we were doing more like 0.48. Um, it will bring us in between somewhere 500,000 and 200,000 if we did 0.48. The first bubbles were like one, I think the first one was like almost like 1.2% or something crazy like that. That bubble was like 15,000% relatively to the trend or something like that. We are going to be about 80% to the trend. So it's again one more indicator that you can use and give you some insights about what is going on with Bitcoin. The next indicator we're going to develop, I'm going to do something with MicroStrategy, because we found a nice power law between MicroStrategy and the price of Bitcoin. That, of course, since they started to switch, and do mostly Bitcoin, leveraging, and basically what we are doing. And there is, like you can see, there is a leverage between MicroStrategy, about 1.3, so like about 30% leverage relatively to Bitcoin. So we could make a strategy based on, okay, this is what happens to Bitcoin, and this is kind of predictive of what is going to happen to MicroStrategy. So there's some information, but if people want to use it, it will be there. So I'm almost done with that indicator. Hopefully by next week it will be ready, and everybody that is an insider is going to get it for free, in the package that everybody gets. All right, so I'm going to take a few more questions if there are a few more questions. Otherwise, I think we had a very productive meeting. Anybody has any questions about this? Okay. So if there are not questions, it means everything it was explained nicely and clearly. Feel free always, to DM me if you have any personal questions or things you want to clarify, or make it part of a discussion in the general channel, and I will try to answer, or other people will try to answer. Okay, so thank you so much to have joined us today, and I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we have another meeting, general meeting. Goodbye, everybody.
Take it easy, Giovanni.
Bye.